Glory to you, Lord. Chapter 23, verses 23 to 26. At that time, Jesus said, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. You blind guides, straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and the plate, that the outside also may be clean." The Gospel of the Lord. Dear friends in Christ Jesus, the Gospel today sounds very strong, but we should also see this whole of this chapter, Matthew 23, has series of oaths. There are 7 oaths which Jesus pronounced against the Pharisees and the scribes. Again, we should not also misunderstand a kind of anti-Jewish kind of a treatment of St. Matthew, which sometimes even the Christians have extensively used for wrongly quoting and sometimes even creating a kind of a not so good feeling with the Jews. It is not exactly Jesus was attacking the Jewish community, because all the people who were following him, most of them, and he also was traveling with very close friends, disciples who were also Jews. So it was not a kind of leveling criticism against a community or something. It is actually Jesus Christ is only trying to find out the mistakes and try to correct the people who are in authority, and they would not agree to him. And he lists 7 types of oaths. And dear friends, all of us have a similar mentality that Jesus' oaths were only applicable to the Pharisees and the scribes, which is not the case. Any one of us who has been invested with the power to be in authoritative position can have this danger. We really need to check time and again, am I yielding into this kind of a temptation which the Pharisees and the scribes of those days fell. So I would like to quickly give you all the 7 types of woes and why Jesus really pronounced it, and a lesson that we can take home for today, instead of actually all the time finding fault with the Pharisees and scribes who lived years back. The first kind of woe is actually Jesus condemns the teaching of the Pharisees and the scribes, which is actually makes it virtually impossible for people to enter into a relationship with God. Every rule should lead people into a good relationship. And so the law which Moses gave, all these laws should take people to God and make them enter into a wonderful relationship with God. But what really happened is the Pharisees and scribes were so much taken up with their own scrupulous actions. People were only trying to imitate their scrupulous action, and it was actually preventing people from entering into a relationship with God. So this is what is the first oath. Jesus is against this whole scrupulous action which was preventing people from entering into relationship. And the second type of the second woe is it refers to the traveling of the Jewish community to various people who were into the diaspora and try to preach the law and actually create burden for the Gentile community, because they were so much obsessed with the law, there was no real relationship happening with people. And invariably, if you see the Gentiles who are completely alien to this whole Jewish tradition, to enter into a relationship with God, it becomes virtually impossible, which means the Gentiles will be shut out of the kingdom. So Jesus was against this whole prevention of Gentiles entering into the kingdom. So he pronounces that vow, and if you read through, you will understand. I would suggest all of us go through this whole chapter of Matthew 23. Third vow is, he calls them as blind guides, because he very clearly says, you are the ones who need guidance. You are all the time giving guidance. That's what I really believe on this. We are good in counseling people, we are giving and advising, we are good in advising people, all that is fine. But very many times, we are the ones who really need counseling. We are the ones who really need guidance. We are the ones who really need advice. But we don't want to accept that all the time, we give it for the others. So Jesus says, you yourself are blind, and how are you going to guide the others? And both of you are going to fall. So it's a kind of an attitude of all the time trying to help others instead of receiving help, which has got a lot to do with pride and humility, which we have dealt sufficiently. And the fourth vow is again is the scrupulosity of following the law, which would be very much directly linked with our gospel text, paying tithes, 1/10. Of course, the reference here is whatever you are able to produce from your field, the grains, you're supposed to give 1/10 of your income, your proceeds. But you know how the Pharisees and scribes, they extended it to so far that people were even expecting, like even some herbs that they were planting in the garden back at the back of the house, even for that they were demanding 1/10 of the tithe, which really was a big burden. And very, very interestingly, see, neglecting the fact that they were supposed to follow justice, faithfulness, and love, you leave all these important aspects and start holding on to this 1/10 tithe and extend it to even things which were not actually demanded by law. It's very interestingly today it is said, it's a kind of a pun that Jesus uses for the insect and the camel, which has got almost a similar word, but he says, you are taking away the small insect from your drink because it is unclean, while you eat a camel, which is again unclean. So you feast on a camel, but you are so scrupulous about an insect. Again, it says it's a kind of a pun, it's a kind of a dig that he takes on the Pharisees. It simply says, you are so scrupulous about the law, but you are not really following the law. So that was the fourth law. Woe was against that. And fifth woe was against the ritual purity. Again, ritual purity, which was meant for the priestly tradition, people are trying to extend it to the rest of the people also and try to create burden for them. Sometimes it can even happen. People who are supposed to follow certain rules, certain ritual laws and regulations, sometimes we extend it to everyone else. Just because it is a kind of a demanding stuff that is happening for us, we should not also burden the rest of the people. So what is more important is purity of heart. Don't worry about so scrupulous about other external purity, the ritual purity. Of course, people who are expected to follow it, we need to follow it. Let's not extend it to every one of them. And the sixth vow is again the same concern about ritual purity, which talks about the whitewashed tombs. Of course, the tombs were whitewashed before big festivals, so that people will be careful not to touch the whitewashed tombs, because it is going to bring in defilement, and they have to be away from their community for 7 days. Jesus says, yeah, you all look very, very stylish, you all look very elegant like whitewashed tombs, because it looks very new, renewed, everything is fine. But what is inside is all bones, all dirt, all worms. Sometimes our life can be also externally we are perfect, but within four walls we live a life which is miserable. We need to really work on our own lives. And finally, the seventh vow is against how the Pharisees honor so much about the prophets and the people who lived before, but if you see, they have persecuted invariably everyone. So very many times we talk very highly about our history, but when it comes to everyday reality, we would be actually doing the opposite. So Jesus says, you are praising prophets, but you have never treated anyone, and which means they are also not even able to recognize the Son of Man, and they are persecuting him. But they always take pride in saying, we have always treated prophets so well. But Jesus condemns and says, name one prophet whom have you treated. So dear friends, if you see these 7 woes, if you go through them carefully one by one, everything points towards us, especially the ones who have power, who have authority in some degree, in some level. So instead of all the time identifying Jesus' criticisms, everything was for the Pharisees and scribes, we are the Pharisees and scribes in some way or other. Just let's go through them one by one and see how self-righteous we are very many times, and we live a very hypocritical life, which is simply a kind of a show, an acting in front of others. Yes, but fine, we might do a lot of acting, but personally we need to also work on our own selves. Eventually, whatever all the bad things that are going on within, all the worms, all the dirt that is within ourselves, we are able to identify, accept and throw them out. I think Jesus, instead of giving these woes, he would only bless us abundantly.